red isn't so good, yellow's intermediate, green is real good. And then we talk about the constraints. So where there's limitations, where these red scores pop up, there's something going on that probably should get our attention. And of course, there's a 140-page manual that comes with this, available free online, that talks all about our soil health testing and how we, kind of practically, remember, we're land grant university, a lot of researchers and scientists using this information to make decisions going forward, to move the science of soil forward. But at the same time, that's all scientific and kind of dry. There's also a lot of useful information in that to spin off in both directions, either to dive more deeply into what the soil is and how it's doing, to get some quantitative numbers on the soil. But there's a lot of quantitative information that we can get from soil, smelling it, looking at it, digging it, kicking it, just simply looking at it, that's useful too. Another thing we do in the soil, with the soil, we get samples from all over the world, and there's an artist that works in our group. There's a picture of her at the bottom left, Kirsten Kurtz. She's our lab manager, and she's collected soils that come in of interesting colors over the years. And believe it or not, she's started soil painting. And these are some really large paintings. They're not quite life size, but they're 5 feet tall and 4 feet wide, like from soils that we've collected in our soil in our lab. From different places that people have sent them to us. The one exception I will say is the one in the center is this Three Sisters picture. The green you see in the foreground, this grass, I actually sent to France to an area where they use this green clay as a facial mask. It's a resort area. We didn't have any greens in our repertoire of soils, but they did have some for sale online. So I did order that green for her to do this big project. But they actually her and two other gals, three women, made this picture in the middle here of three sisters dancing together. It's after an old, about 100-year-old painting from Austria, called The Rites of Spring, where there were three goddesses dancing to usher in spring, and they kind of took a play on that, and they became these three artists became three sisters. But of course, they took on the persona of the three sisters of the indigenous folks of this area, the Iroquois Indians, where they use the corn, beans, and squash together to make an ecological approach to growing their plants. And then actually they entered that soil painting contest, won first prize in the university division in 2017. Then the picture on the right, this was done at a music festival the next year. A tattoo artist came in and drew the background, and the three more artists colored in the roses. And you can see the F, is that an F clef or a G clef in the middle there? That was done at the music festival. So that drew a lot of people, and it was kind of interesting for the people to see that, and how everyone would comment and say, "Oh, I saw soil that color when I was a kid. I remember that." The soil is fundamental to all of us, and it's a really unifying thing. It's great for extension and outreach. It's a great teaching tool to get people interested in soil. I just wanted to show this, let you know that we just do stuff besides stick our nose in soil all day. So yeah, I talked about soil ecology before. So soil ecology is really what goes on in all of nature. It's the interaction, it's the back and forth, it's the life and death, it's just the interrelationships of things, and it goes on all day, all night, everywhere, at all scales. And the problem is it's so complex that we brush over it. But once we see the complexity and enter into it and become it, as those with the green thumb get that, it starts to become, you do see it everywhere. And it does become easier because it becomes so familiar. You see it's the same thing at a different scale in a different way, but there's analog after analog. And then one thing I did want to point out is it's funny how when you're young, you hear that the green plant and photosynthesis is the secret of the life on Earth, and we learn the formula. What green plants plus water plus CO2, the presence of sunlight gives sugar, produces C6H12O6. But that's it really is everything. So with these plants living and dying, they're just feeding all these small creatures that feed bigger creatures, of course. But then this is all we always think about life. but in nature, death is equally important. So each of these creatures, when they die, all their body parts that have been created from other pieces of other organisms and just raw elements is released back to the environment for these plants or these other feeders to use again. So it seems silly on one hand, but it's everything. It's all there is this constant interplay. It's a transformation of chemicals and energy and the death preparing for the next life. And so back to soil testing. So when we look at the soil, we can see there's a lot going on. There's a soil, these two soils are 100 feet apart. One on the left is in a long-term corn producing field, and on the right is more of a grassy area. It's the same material under different management. And so you can see that the one on the left, we've got a lot of words for the soil on the left. We call it compacted or hard. Farmers would call it difficult or cloddy or tough. And on the right, the same material growing under grass is loose, porous, crumbly, mellow, healthy. Now, what's going on? And I think you can see just at a glance, you can see there's more that the soil on the right, it seems to be, at least to me, it's teeming with life. There's all these places where life could be. You can almost imagine it between all those crumbs. You imagine earthworms in that crumbly soil. Or you look at the soil on the left, where would a creature live? If it did it, you'd see a little one sticking its head out. That's about it. There's not as much going on there. So that doesn't mean that the soil on the left doesn't support life. It does, but it's a different kind of life, less total amount of it, and the material is just different. And so even looking at it, so physically we look at it, we know that there's probably different nutrient availability on the left. The roots won't be able to travel in it as easily. The pH might be changed from the human use. We've certainly affected the carbon dynamics by removing carbon to sell it and growing certain crops, where the grass is leaving all its everything that it grows, certainly below ground, is left behind, above ground as well, as getting worked in. So why would we test our soil? Why would we want to know if it's the same area? We walk 100 feet, we'd want to know beneath our feet, is one different than another? Do I have to test this? Can I just look at it? Well, so I think we all have approached a soil that we wanted to test to know more about. And there are some general strategies that I wanted to put forward that seem to really work as you go forward. First one is to for anyone who gardens, I guess, particularly landscapers, you want to know your site, and you want to approach it. You want to develop a set of questions, so you know where things grow good, where you've got some issues, special plant needs that are or aren't being met. You might have questions about the soil. And we always recommend for soil testing to create some sort of a map. First of all, to just orient yourself, and then you can keep track of where you took samples and what you encountered when you were taking samples. Also, then when you get the results, you can go back to this map, kind of say, yeah, these are the results, and here's where I was. You can forget those things. It's just good to have a map and certainly a plan. When you identify your issues, what do you want to know? It's just so important, particularly with our this soil health testing. I didn't mention that test that report that I showed on the first page. That's $150 per sample. That's a lot of money. So you're not going to take one of these samples, submit it, and get all that information and just kind of glance at it and throw it away. It's something you're really studying. You're working with. It's quite an endeavor. It's quite you're embarking on quite a journey of learning and getting your questions answered. So you better ask some good ones and have things identified ahead of time. So we like to put this sort of thinking forward to get people on the right page. And of course, with landscaping, it's very complex. The different sites I show on this central picture. I have a big 1, a big 2, a big 3. Imagine taking a sample. My mom might walk to area 1, put some soil in the bag, 2 in the same bag, from the lawn. She would put all that in the same bag and say, well, here's my sample. I'd say, Mom, that's not how a soil scientist thinks. Please don't do that. And of course, I think you would know that too. So, we want to really, again, focus. We want to troubleshoot. We want to think positively. We're going to spend $150 on each of these 1, 2, 3 samples. We want to know what we're sampling. We want to sample area 1 and get an idea of what's going on in area 1. We know the plants that are there. We have questions. Does the media that's here meet these needs? So we want to sample it distinctly and separately from area 2, perhaps, and then separately, of course, from the grass in area 3. And we always recommend this, and this is worth talking about when we collect a sample. We always dig a small hole about 6 inches deep, maybe 6 inches wide, and we put the material from that hole just off to the side. We always use a spade, and then from that hole we come down an inch back from the side of the hole and dig down 6 inches and collect this slice of soil. Now this slice of soil comes out onto the spade. The spade's horizontal here now, and it can be very much like a slice of pie. It could be much wider at the surface than at the subsurface. It could be thicker at the top or bottom. And what we want to do then is return all the extra soil that isn't the same amount from the top and bottom right back into the hole. So what we want on our spade by the time we're done is the same amount of material, a rectangle that's the same amount of surface material all the way down to 6 inches, from there 0 to 6 inch. So it's not wider at the surface or at the bottom, so that when we put our subsample into the pail, we've captured that 0 to 6 inch fairly into the pail. And we would do that repeatedly, maybe 5 or 6 times for each sample, 5 or 6 subsamples into the pail, mix that, and that would become our sample. And of course, I mentioned this idea of separating samples in a different from different zones. We really focus all the time on this contrasting idea. If we have this is a cornfield, I think it's a really good example. This cornfield is managed exactly the same every year. How come this is growing well here and not good here? It's a kind of an easy setup. We wouldn't take one sample and walk across that field and take subsamples from these different areas, put it into a pail, mix that, and say, here's my soil sample, tell me what to do. We'd say we sample from area 1, the good area 1, put that in one pail. For area 2, I'll put that in another pail. And then the difference between those 2 samples could tell us what's going on in those different areas. Of course, this is very close. It's just demonstration of the idea. But this contrasting, we learn from contrasts always. And so anytime we can isolate 2 separate things and ask a good question about it that we're curious about, that's a good couple pieces of information to collect. And of course, soil testing for the longest time for nutrients is to evaluate nutrient deficiencies. And I thought here I'd show some classic kind of what you see in strawberries, phosphorus deficiency or potassium deficiency, some dramatic color changes. And you might see something like this on your fruit, on your leaves in a fruit production, or you see some sort of salt injury. Well, you'd probably want to then test the soil to confirm what you think you're seeing, make sure it's not a disease or an insect causing that. But that's a real good way to move into yellow. Your plants look yellow. You think it's nitrogen. Of course, it's worth testing the soil to find out just what is going on. And the soil chemical testing has always been used for that for a long time. And this is the foundation of all soil testing is still soil chemistry. It's so important. We look for lime with the pH, and the pH tests give some information on the lime needs, nutrients, micronutrients, and of course the gross organic matter percent. And the interesting thing about chemical testing is that we get these levels, these amounts, the values are found from the chemical testing. And then what we get back from experience, we know these levels are high or low for the different crops of interest. And then we can even give a high or low score, like we do with the colors. But then we can even say, how much do you need to add to get a decent yield, or to get just good growth, non-limiting growth. So that's very useful. I mean, we can be very proud of that since World War II. All this has been developed. It's amazing. We can dial right in, and for different soil types, certainly that plays a part in it too. Different soil types have different, not with the same nutrient extracted value would have a different recommendation for amount of fertilizer to add, because the soil has a different yield potential, or it's sandier or clayier. It might just need more or less fertilizer or lime to get that change needed. So we've made great strides with the soil chemistry, but of course it's that's only one facet. That's only one leg of what we're considering a three-legged stool. So I'm going back to this that soil health report I showed on the on my first slide. Before I talk about what's in the middle of the page, it's to look on the right. This is what that soil looks like that I sampled and put its soil health report there in the middle. The soil, it's really beat up. The soil's been, it's on the edge of campus. There's some plant breeders out there. They've grown wheat in these fields for 50 years. And every year they grow their wheat. It's a spring wheat. They harvest it in the fall. They take off the straw and they come back. They plow the next spring, plant their spring wheat. They collect seed for plant breeding. And so for many years, the soil has just been managed very intensively. And so the soil is not in great shape. It's really suffering. You can see how it's all crusted at the top. It's smeared. It's actually slaked. You can see where I took some soil out. I put a hole in the middle of it then with a push probe. But just this is what that soil looks like in springtime. It even doesn't look great. It doesn't look great. But when we tested for soil nutrients, where I've blocked out here, don't pay attention to that. The organic matter is very low. It's 2.1% organic matter. Score is in the red zone. I guess you can see that from looking at it. But look at the soil nutrients, the soil chemical aspects. It's all in the green zone. So if I just had this report in front of me, if I sent to a different testing lab, I'd get my results back and it'd say, "Oh, your organic matter is a little low, but your great fertility. Go. You don't need to add any fertilizer. Get out of here. You're all set." I'm teasing, but you can see what's there. We don't have a soil that's balanced and productive at all, regardless of what the nutrients tell us. The nutrient testing. So this is where we kind of got the idea to pursue soil health back 20 years ago. In extension, we used to call this sick soil syndrome. We'd go to a field, there'd be a terrible crop in a field like this. And the different specialists would all say, "Well, I think it's a nematode problem." The chemist would say it might be a nutrient problem. So physicists would say, "Oh, it's a hard soil, it's compaction." So everyone had these different ideas, and everyone was kind of right. It's got a bunch of problems, but we didn't have any way to test that. We just kind of, all we had was the test. The results is here in the white. And we didn't really have a way to get this information out and test it. So soil health was this idea that, no, let's go into these other realms, get some more information, and get the whole picture. And so this is what you'd see in the real report. I've highlighted in these pink loops here to show just where the test isolates that the surface hardness is in the red zone. That's going to affect rooting, water transmission, water entry, erosion, runoff, all that. Same with the soil structure, again, affecting the soil aeration. You can see how it's kind of smeared and crusted here. That's going to affect oxygen transfer, CO2 getting out. Rooting, crusting, sealing, it's just a mess. This is one of the tests in the physical realm. And then here in the biological realm, the one that really stands out is the energy source for the soil biota. So by having low organic matter in general, we've also got a small amount of active carbon. This is a type of carbon. We've got all these different species, if you will, of carbon that we've broken out to kind of understand the carbon. Remember, the carbon is things that were basically things that were once alive. Organic matter, all organic material was once alive. So this now dead material is food for some next creature. And so we see there's not much of that there because we've been removing the crop from this land every year. The roots stay behind, but even the crop isn't very thrifty. So there's a whole lot of just degradation here. And so there's just not a lot of food for the creatures to live on. So again, what I did mention was that this report then is really geared for soil management. First we're not just making some colored picture here to to impress someone or whatever. It's these action items here. These are issues. These are essential soil processes that just aren't going on well. They're impaired. So when we plan for our management, we take all these things into account. We'd say, well, how can I affect my rooting? What can I do to decrease the surface hardness? I might then suggest some sort of management plan that addresses that. Maybe I'd decompact the soil with tillage, or maybe I'd change my tillage strategy a little bit. The structural stability, what would I do to address this stability, to increase aeration and infiltration? Again, it's about soil loosening. It's about incorporating organic matter into this realm in different ways, either as bringing it on or growing it in as maybe a cover crop, green manure, that sort of thing. So this whole picture here is really developed to talk about enabling folks to get information to make better decisions using this information on their soil and to track it in time. Okay, moving to the soil physical realm. I mentioned the soil physical realm in blue. That's the house. That's the place where everything takes place. So it's got to stay there. It can't just rinse away. We don't need it to don't want it to break down. All these nice soil aggregates here, these crumbs. In between all these crumbs are passages where water can move. Water can be infiltrated. But of course, when water moves into these large pores very quickly during a rain, let's say, it moves through, and then these big pores drain. Well, these pores, as they drain, then air can enter. So what actually happens when it rains in a structured soil like this, water enters this large pore here, and as the water enters, it expels the old air. So as Mother Nature, woman, female, takes a drink, she also exhales the stale air, and then as this water enters and further down into the profile, fresh air follows. So she takes a fresh breath of air. So she exhales stale air, gets a drink, and takes in fresh air after the water. So it's really a beautiful thing. That's why these structured soils are so nice. At a glance, we smile. We say, "Oh, that's nice soil." It makes us feel good. Because without that, you have this impeded soil that's compacted and dense. You don't get those exchanges, and so it's sickly. And so the soil looks very robust, and it is just on that little functioning alone of the water moving in is already moving in this dead physical world. It's already moving nature in a direction that is very useful. And of course, where do we get these aggregates? Well, they come from roots themselves. I'll talk about this more, but the roots themselves, all roots die in place unless we harvest them. So if this root travels down 18 inches, it's going to die right there. A lot of farmers talk about, I'm going to plow in some organic matter. Well, you can actually grow it in, and it's never coming out. So if you have a taproot that grows down 12 inches, big fat taproot the size of a pencil. Well, when that dies, it's going to stay right there and shrink. Something's going to go down, some insect or creature is going to go down and after that and eat it, an earthworm maybe, and it's going to shrink. The bacteria will eat at it, but that's going to be a big pore for a long time in the soil where, I'm pointing at this big pore again, where air and water can move quickly through. So, and that happens at all different scales. So all these roots are going to die right where they are, and their whole purpose, when the plant dies, is to feed these creatures in the soil. And we all know about earthworms, but it's interesting to think about. The earthworm is kind of this slimy creature, right? You get earthworm slime on your hand or something. But when it's moving through the soil through these tight spaces, if you think about it, if it had a shoulder, that goo would be scraping off its shoulder and being left behind on the soil particles and soil crumbs, gluing them together. And you've seen these worm casts. Well, people say, that's gone through the body of the creature. Well, that too, but there's a lot of things that happen not just going through, but going on because it's moving through these slimes and the slimes of the root itself. The root is giving off compounds to flavor the soil, just like the a tree gives off leaves and affects the soil beneath it, smothering grass or whatever, thick leaves, the root does the same thing. It's the below ground. It's giving out, it's purposefully letting some of these roots die just to feed the creatures around it so they can do more work to make elements more easily available to the root to take up. And so that, yeah, I'm really keen on these soil aggregates. I think they're very telling. This health of a soil, it's really, it's almost the muscle tone of a person or an animal. That's what the soil structure is. It's physical. At a glance, you can tell kind of the history of what's been going on in the soil. It kind of reveals that just at a glance. And there we are back again at these two contrasting fields right near each other. And now we can start to see on the right all these larger pores where all this water can enter and move in deeper into the profile, where roots will chase that water because the water will solubilize nutrients. And where the water grows, the roots will go. And of course, the roots can go down through here. The water moves in easily, the roots move easily. We get this life cycling, this turnover. And so we get this, again, crumbly structure from earthworms and other small creatures. And over here on the left, again, we see that, boy, that's just not going to happen in this soil. Now, this soil could be loaded with fertility, but the point I'm trying to make here in the middle is that the soil isn't just a place where we put nutrients and then the plant does the rest and we've done what we can, off we go. It's really it's a husbandry. We respect what's going on the right hand side here, and we want to always move in this general direction. And if our soil is moving this direction, that's okay. It happens, especially with farmers. It's a wet year, a tough harvest moves this soil to look a little bit more like this because you're out there when you shouldn't be, but you have to get your crop in or out. Farmers aren't trying to destroy their soil to make it look like this, but it happens. So we're always wanting to move in this general direction back towards this. And so the idea is to instill in ourselves that capacity to get a feeling what we might have to do to move in this direction, rather than just add our fertility and leave it to nature and blame the weather. And I was going to show this again with this contrasting soils. On the edge of campus, I talked about the area where they had that, the plant breeders had that wheat growing for so many years. And right next to that, there's also a grassy area that I've flipped over and took some pictures and moved in on. And so you can see what those crumbs look like. These crumbs here are all kind of cloddy and crumbly. They're hard. They're not generous at all. Where the clods here, when you break them out, you can see lots of roots and lots of this is just soft and nice, and it's the same soil material, but it's in different. It's got different muscle tone over here, if you will, than over here, and that's what we measure with our soil structural test. We put a number on this tone of the crumbs. Of course, here we are. I'm going to show the soil health report. I'm going to block out all the information except the soil nutrients. Of course, here the nutrients look great. Over here, not about the same. The pH needs a little adjustment. But you'd think from just this information, these soils are pretty similar. They ought to be fairly similar. They both got the same fertility. What's the big deal? Well, looking at it, you can tell something's different. But of course, like we showed before, there's plenty of other biological and physical factors that are out of range here. You can name, measure, talk about the processes that are impaired, and then talk about the management. The remaining eight pages of the 10-page report talk about using this information to manage the soil better, or just all the options for management. And of course, the grass sod, that tests very high. That comes back very high. Everything is in the dark green and green, except for the pH. But this would be a contrast sample from the poor area and the good area. Or you might wonder, you might walk to this field and say, wow, just how bad is this field? Well, if we compare it to this, we can say this is a field that was in pasture. This is how good it gets. And this is what this intensive management has done to those soil functions. You might be able to guess that after a while, looking at this soil just at a glance. I can guess some of these things looking at it after a lot of experience. But if you're new to this, you can kind of say, oh yeah, I can see this isn't going to take in as much water. You see these cracks and think, oh, water's going to zip in through those cracks. But there's millions of cracks here. Every square inch has millions. Where here we have whole square inches where there's not a single crack. But again, sorry to use this, come back to this soil health report again, but it just kind of demonstrates just this foundation, and that will spin off from in shortly. Here's one of the tests I talked about, the soil structural ability, that crumb structure, that physical tone, if you will. We test it with this raindrop maker here. So this is a rain simulator. These are soil samples underneath on sieves, underneath this rainmaker. We drop a ½ inch of rain every 5 minutes on these crumbs, 4 or 5 minutes. So these crumbs used to be cast randomly and perfectly across this sieve, both these sieves. And these crumbs, 87% of them broke through this sieve. They were happy to sit on there before the rain, but most of them melted down and fell through. And we're able to put a number that only 13% of them survived that rainstorm. Where over here, 53% of these crumbs survived that rainstorm. That's in the green zone and the red zone. So here's just kind of how we put a number on that structural stability that you see demonstrated in the field. Now with this, if somebody says, oh, my soil structural stability is about 60%, I'm up to 60%, you can know what that means. So this is just a way to get from those numbers. What the heck is 50% stability, 15% stability? I don't know what that means. Well, this is just a way to kind of peer into that. Oh, this is those same two soils. This is the pasture. This on the right, this is the healthier soil. On the left is the intensively managed soil with the tractor on it. We rained a whole inch of rain south of this blue line on these two little dioramas at the same time. And if you notice what the soil looks like, let's start on the left here. This is what these soil crumbs look like before the rain. An inch of rain really melted down these crumbs, just really caused a lot of erosion. In fact, we caught the runoff here in that little jar. You can see a lot of material left this little diorama, and this soil is just a mess. On the right, this is the better version of that soil. If you notice, after an inch of rain, this soil here looks the same as it started. So in other words, this soil in this condition kind of laughed at the rain and said, yeah, bring it on, we'll take it. And it took it and transmitted it down through the sod. You see, we had a little bit of runoff, not much soil at all. What little we got was because it was a little diorama and wasn't a bigger area. But this kind of just shows this is what happens in the field. This is, again, from those numbers, then you start to see, oh my gosh, I've seen fields that look like this. Well, you see this, and that's the red zone. This isn't sustainable. You're losing your best soil. It's called topsoil for a reason, not because it's at the top. It's top notch. It's the best material for the most fertility is the very surface. And if it's leaving the field, maybe you've paid for fertilizer, you've paid for that. That's going somewhere else that they might not. That location might not want it. It might be a lake or a pond that doesn't want all that fertility. It ought to be here helping your crops or your grass or what have you. So this is just a demonstration we use. We show this to kids. We do this with the kids. And actually, when we break this soil off here, we let it dry, put a fan on it, and then we'll take a little chunk of the soil out. And below it, it's about the thickness of a coin, a little thicker. It flips up, and it's bone dry underneath. So here we put on an inch of rain. It only wet in a quarter of an inch. All the rest of the water ran off. Of course, we dig in here. It's damp all the way through. So it really makes it just a nice little point to illustrate kind of what we saw in those other slides in the laboratory with those sieves. It kind of shows that this physical condition of the soil really integrates a whole lot of the soil ecology. It's evidence of a good, healthy soil biology or an unhealthy soil biology. Here's where we talk about management. Here's an extension agent, Carol McNeil, a top-notch agent. She's standing in front of a field. Here's a row of cabbage. That had a cover crop back here. Nothing grew well in this field. What's going on? It had plenty of fertility, but nothing was growing well, and people were guessing, well, it's this, it's that, well, what's wrong? But we were able to test it, get this information back, then talk about what we might do, work with the grower, come up with ideas, maybe change management, either tillage, rotation, cover cropping, resting the soil, what have you. And so here we are back to the our slide where we talked about the soil ecology, soil health as soil ecology with our colored discs. Again, I talked about the house, the soil physical world, where all these things take place, where the water enters, the air enters, water stored there. It's the place where the roots get at all those things, like the chemical nutrients. The meat and potatoes of soil behavior is really the soil chemistry, nutrient storage, release, the pH for solubility. But of course, soil life is the biology, and the biology is really what makes the ecology function, because that's where the energy transfer takes place in the life. And so all these roots and debris, as they die, or even when they're alive, feed the microbial community. The microbes, then when they die, they release nutrients for the next roots to uptake. And of course, I did want to mention that a robust, highly functioning, busy soil, full of life, teeming with life, living and dying, is more resistant and quite resistant to disease organisms. Disease organisms are famous for coming in and preying on weakened communities. So if you've got a robust community that's selecting for the strongest already and towards a higher functioning, the bad guys, if you will, they stand at the sideline. They can't get in at all. They can't get a foothold. They wither in the face of this robust community. So the best health, the best defense is a good health, even in the soil. Best defense against disease is health. And of course, here's the things we might do in a very generalized way. Particularly, I added these for kind of a horticultural approach, where rather than plowing, we could loosen the soil, we can mix in composts. Of course, farmers don't typically mix in compost, they can, but certainly for landscapers, these are things that we can directly think about. You can add lime and fertilizers. Lime is very important for gardening. And of course, biology, the organic matter, and the specific composts and material we bring in and how we stir the soil has a huge effect on the biology. And that I'll talk a lot about this going forward. Now we'll move into the biological realm. Before we do, one last plug for the soil management aspect of all this soil testing. Again, we talked about the soil hardness here, the structural stability, organic matter. I talked about that active carbon, the energy source. Well, here's where on page 10, we've got a table here for short and long term, what you might do if your surface hardness was high. This is generally built for agricultural techniques, but it also applies to landscaping. But the surface hardness is high. Things you would do in short and long term. You put a living mulch or shallow rooted cover crop maybe to reduce that hardness. But in longer term, you might change your traffic patterns, move sidewalks or walkways or traffic lanes. This low structural stability, fresh organic materials in the near term, add manure in the near term. Longer term, rotation with sod crops, surface mulches, reducing tillage. So the biological realm, this is really where it all comes together, I think. You can see it here, a clump of sod. It's just tremendous what goes on underground. Roughly, it's not the same, it's close. But we talk about the tons per acre of grass or hay yield. Well, there's tons of roots being produced too per acre per year that are living and dying. And these will turn over. These don't live forever. And a lot of them are, the plant does, I've seen numbers as high as 40%, maybe even 50% of what plants produce in their roots is given purposefully to the soil to feed the creatures, that then help feed back to the plant. And of course, what happens here, I wanted to say, these living creatures, they decompose some of this organic matter, right? There's everything that was once alive or is alive is organic. So how can we increase our organic matter if we're trying to get more creatures to live? They're breathing and they're breathing off carbon dioxide. How can we have a healthier soil and sequester more carbon if we're spinning it faster and making more carbon dioxide? Well, it's one of those complex things. It's not unlike an athlete who, I think we all know that to build muscle, you break, well, in the act of exercising, let's say exercising, you're breaking down your muscle tissue. But of course, when you recover the next morning, you have more muscle than you did the day before. So it's the same idea with nature. As you exercise these natural processes and make the soil more, make the system more capable of more robust, it can hold more of all this activity, and then therefore sequester more carbon. So it's kind of one of those paradoxes that's sometimes hard to answer. And there it is again. It's the high carbon additions, any sort of carbonaceous addition to the soil through roots or manures or composts. That's going to favor the bacterial populations first. And then they can grow so fast that they can outcompete plants, particularly for nitrogen. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And of course, if we stirring that can accentuate that effect. So we've all seen this when we add wood chips to a soil and they say, oh, don't do that. Well, if you've ever done it, or too many leaves, green leaves to a soil, you turn it in, it takes a while for those leaves to, if you will, break down. What we say, the leaves have to break down to release those nutrients back to the soil. Well, what's actually happening is those leaves have to get eaten by the creatures that can increase in number. The bacteria in particular, they will eat that carbon in those leaves. They'll eat that and they'll rob the soil of any nitrogen that's around and outcompete any plants. The plants will turn yellow for want of nitrogen. But then once those bacteria reach their maximum population from all that energy, and then they use up that carbon, now they start to die. And when that population crashes, all their bodies, if you think of a bacteria as a water balloon, it's full of all this goo and DNA and RNA, nitrogen compounds. Remember endoplasmic reticulum and cell membranes, all this stuff has sulfur and nitrogen and protein in it. All that that goo bursts out into the soil for other creatures to eat and turn over. And very, very soon in all that turnover, the plant's able to then get what it needs. So that's why time is a factor. But we can cheat time by watching how we manage the things we add, when we add them, and how much we add, so that we have what we need when we need it. And here, I wanted to mention this. I've heard it said there's more organisms in a tablespoon of soil than people on the earth. It always makes me laugh because I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. But I know it's true. It's one of those things you just shake your head and move on, because that's how it is. That's just how it goes. It's just the soil is just teeming with creatures you can't imagine. Continually living, dying, preying on each other. It's just making things richer. Each one full of goo. When it dies, that goo is released. And something else is eating. It's sticking the soil together for a while. Then something's eating that soil particle that's all stuck together so nice. Some creature's eating on that, wanting to eat that gunk that's holding it together. And here's in blue here, I mentioned this before, how if we're decomposing organic matter with all these creatures eating on it, how can we be sequestering carbon? And again, that's the paradox of, if we're robust, it's like being strong, it's like building muscle. As we build a robust system, we're able to sequester more, even though we're decomposing more. We're just spinning the cycle faster, but the net result is that we keep more muscle mass behind, more biological mass, and that's where the carbon is. And of course, as all these functions are going on, we're increasing that aggregation, and of course, then the pore space and the compacted soil, it decompacts the soil. We're increasing nutrient availability from all this living and dying, this cycling. This specific mycorrhiza around roots, you've heard of this. That's the thin film in the rhizospheres, this little area next to the root, where the root cells might be, just the edge of the root. It's kind of slimy. It's as slimy as the plant might be in its roots. But that area, then the more active it is, then there's more opportunity for those. If it's the plant, depending on the plant, it modifies this according to its characteristics, and it will then cause those battles to be going on between these creatures, drawing them or repelling certain ones and drawing others, so that the net result from this one killing this one releases perhaps iron that it needs, and it somehow knows that, and it's all tied into the DNA of all these creatures, and the plant is kind of the orchestrator of all that. I really like this slide. It kind of shows this is an actively growing root tip. And so this is the root cap, this very end here. And so this is the meristem is right here. And so all these cells are rapidly dividing and moving forward. The cells further back are staying right where they are. That it can grow wider, but they stop elongating. So it's kind of like your fingernail. It doesn't grow from the base, it grows up the tip, or grass grows the same way. But all these cells here you see coming off are purposefully, and the plant can't help it, it's pushing through this sometimes rough soil. These cells are coming off on purpose, being given to this environment around the root. And the plant knows just what it's doing. It's giving these, it has characteristic flavors that it has and gives to these cells, or it can't help it. But it gives these flavors, and these flavors can attract certain creatures and repel others. And this is how the plant affects its environment. It's not defenseless. It's actually making defenses and offenses with these cells that it's shedding off, like leaves from a tree. It cells off the root. And one of the things they talk about is in this living area, then this rhizosphere, this area here, it's hard to know where the plant kind of ends and the creatures and this rhizosphere, this other biome, begins. It's hard to know what's where. And it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Again, by analog, it's what we're learning now in our gut. It's the same thing. It's, so much of our gut, they say that there's more cells inside our body that aren't us, that inside our gut that can be more cells than we have, than we control. It's these other organisms there's more of them than there are of us, so to speak. And it's hard to know where in your gut then what part of that is you and what part of that is the other. So it kind of enters into an interesting discussion on just how the interrelationships of life in this, and how you would think genetics over over the eons just really is so strongly at work here, creating organisms that can get past these defenses. And of course, plants are evolving to create ever stronger or trickier defenses. And then there's other creatures that are trying to get a niche to take over from another, and etc. Oh, and here's where, these plants are giving off sugars. When these cells fall off, of course, what they're giving is sugars, nutrients, cellular materials. They're giving that gladly and on purpose to flavor the soil to its advantage. Oh, and root hairs. I like talking about root hairs. So we've all heard about root hairs, are these little cells or these little hairs at the edge of the root. Well, they're short-lived single cells. And of course they would, on this, let's use this diagram up here on the left. that right at the top of this is where you'd start to see root hairs starting to grow out. Because at this tip here, there's just too much friction and activity going on here. The plant is still modifying that environment, this newly encountered world down here. Who knows what's down there? Rocks and sharp rocks. So the roots kind of crushing through there. When it gets through a little ways, behind it, then out pop. It's given off. It's softened the environment with this goo and these flavors have drawn different creatures and repelled others. So now these root hairs start to pop out and absorb what's been dissolved here by all that life and death. And so those little root hairs pop out here, and so they live for a short time. And ready, they're made of one cell. Root hairs are a single cell that they live for a while. They're very absorbing. They absorb that material that's here for a short time. Then of course the root keeps growing, but the root hairs stay right here. So right here, right at the very top of this slide, all those cells across there, any root hairs that's there stays right there. Even if the cell gets longer, this doesn't move. So it's kind of like a tree. If you put a nail in a tree at 18 inches above the ground, a year later, that nail, if the tree gets 3 feet taller, the nail is still at 18 inches above the ground. And it's the same with the root. So the tip grows, but nothing else does. So it gets wider, but it can't get longer. So these root hairs, where they are, soon gets, kind of woody. As time goes on, the root gets longer. This area starts to get woody and is more of a conductive tissue to get down to where the new absorptive tissue is down here as the root expands. And so it's kind of interesting that these root hairs die and burst and add their contents of their material, the materials inside them is given to this rhizosphere to again feed the soil, feed the creatures, flavor the soil, change the pH of the soil, dissolve iron, dissolve zinc, who knows? All these different things that the plant needs, it's got that planned into these root hairs. So they're little kamikazes that it's using for a while, and then giving them off to the cell, to the area around the plant to help take up more nutrients. And of course, there's funguses that live there around the root. They can live there for a long time as the root gets older. And of course, they're taking advantage and eating on all this wonderful food, but they're giving something back to the plant as well. It's a typically symbiotic, where the fungus gets all these wonderful nutrients because it can't make food. It needs to prey. It needs someone else to make the food. It's like an animal, something else to make the food, but its body is kind of acidic and it can dissolve some of the nutrients that are out here that the plant can't quite get, even with what it gives off. But with the help of the root of the fungus, the root and the fungus can work together to get what the plant needs then. So it's a win-win for both creatures. And that, of course, those relationships are developed over a lot of time. Okay, kind of getting to talk about composts then. So when we talk about organic matter, that's stuff that was once alive. And so for soil, it's kind of moving to compost a little bit and related to soil. We've got living organic matter. Organic matter is anything that was once alive. It's just it means carbon, and carbon in the soil would be lime and mineral rock, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, carbonates. That's carbon. That's carbonate. So soil with nothing living in it would be moon material. Stuff from the moon doesn't have any organic material. So what we have here, this organic matter, like in a compost pile, that's exactly what the moon isn't. But imagine if you could add this stuff to the moon material, what you'd get. And that's what we have. And that's what's so fascinating about soil. It's just this mineral matter. It's crushed up. It's tiny pieces of rock. It's nothing. But all the living material and these particular things that are in this organic material really affect the soil. And that's what I want to talk about for the rest of the talk now. So we've got these living organisms and roots in the soil at any given time. That's the living organic matter. The dead is the recently dead stuff. That's what you might be able to recognize in some of the slides before in those soil crumb structure. We saw some tiny roots. Those that you can still tell was a root of some sort. You don't know from what, but that would be kind of what they call active particulate organic matter. That one test that we do is the active carbon, that kind of in this realm here. Then the very dead, or the stable material, kind of like what we call humus, unrecognizable stuff, holds a lot of water, holds a lot of nutrients. You can't tell what it was anymore. That's the very dead stuff. And we've got a couple different measures of that in our test as well. And they're all equally important, all used for different things. And energy up here, more for storage down here. This softened by holding more water, it makes the soil softer. Because it holds that water. Of course, water is the staff of life, and so it's important to hold water in soil, particularly if it's sandy. So each one's important, and we'll kind of go through how they play into compost, and then compost in soil. So with organic matter, I kind of mentioned before, on one hand, we need organic matter. We want it to accumulate. I'll start here. We want organic matter to accumulate. We want to, if we have more organic matter in our soil, more carbon in our soil, we're going to be able to store water. We're going to retain water better. It's just such a good thing to have this organic material in our soil. But we also want it to decompose, which means we want it to get eaten on. We want it to go through that, spin through that soil food web, to release nutrients, to glue those aggregates together, to feed each and every one of those different microbes. So we need to balance that. We need to do things that that we have a healthy system, so we're not starving it, but we're also feeding it to turn it over, but we don't want to turn it over so much that we overturn it and stir the fire too much and lose all our coals. So as we stir the soil here, as we show a rototilled bed here, of course we don't see as much organic debris in here anymore. If we rototill this 5 or 10 times in a season or over 2 years, of course, we're going to notice, hey, this soil isn't as soft and loose as it used to be. We're going to keep, by stirring it, we're going to lose a lot of our carbon as carbon dioxide from all the creatures breathing and not bringing more food in. We're going to lose all that, and we're going to lower our balance beam here. But then again, certainly in landscaping, we can bring in by the wheelbarrow load. What we call brown manure compost, or we can even grow what we call green manure. So brown manures typically are spent dead things. Even animal manure is considered brown manure. Green manure is what we call it. We can grow it, so we don't have to go get it. We can grow it right in place. And so of course we don't want to overtill and break down all these things we're building up. Yet we also need to keep feeding, and then we can manage this. We can do plenty of tillage and stirring, as long as we do plenty of feeding. We can balance that. And this is just a slide to show. I think we all know this, but we got the same pile of leaves here in the fall of 2021. If I don't stir it over the course of a year, from fall of 21 to fall of 22, if I don't stir those leaves or stir them very little, I get very little CO2 going off. And so what I've got here is it's a slow biological burn in this pile. Still a lot of leaves left. Those would be like slow roast coals. And here, if I stir vigorously, I get a lot of carbon dioxide going off because I brought that fresh food to those organisms and kept stirring it like rototilling. And the effect is then like a bonfire. I've gotten that effect, but now everything's gone. So I could burn a season's worth of wood in one night in a bonfire and then go cold for the winter, or I could burn it very slowly over the winter and have that same amount of total energy released much slower. So we often liken tillage in farming to kind of a bonfire mentality, or what we call no-till or reduced tillage. We're moving more towards this sort of mentality where we've got plenty of heat, but we're managing it slow. We don't want to lose all our carbon at once. We're going to kind of keep it there, and we're going to use it, but we're going to add it back and use it, and use it. It's sustainable. Of course, a bonfire isn't sustainable. You have to keep running off to get more wood to put on it. Okay, the fresh material, living and recently dead. The growing plants purposefully give this material to its environment, and they affect that environment. And I give this example here. that when a walnut tree, we all know walnut trees, they produce a compound that I think it stinks. It deters competition from plants in its vicinity. And so the leaves fall, or the roots themselves, other plants are growing there, and they say, I can't take it. If this thing's going to be here, this smell's going to be here, or this poison's going to be here, I can't take it. And I'm going to give up. Walnut tree, you can have it. Well, I mean, plants, you should know all plants do that as well. And that's why certain plants grow so well together, or certain plants repel other plants or keep people or animals away. It's all true. The plants are very active producers of compounds. Think of cinnamon. I mean, they make these compounds for a reason. And of course, the organic matter type that's fresh is also the residues that you can recognize. So that would be, we all call it a banana peel. And this stuff you can recognize is still rich in sugar, minerals, vitamins, proteins. We would still eat some of this. We would still eat. It's rich in these compounds. In contrast to straw and wood chips, it doesn't have all those vitamins and minerals. It's got a lot of carbon, but it doesn't have these other good things, the proteins and all the other amino acids and all these useful compounds. So of course we need a mix of that. Right here it is, because it is still fresh, we can still recognize what it is and what it was. And of course, in this stage, if we were to put this material into soil or with soil, we'd have think of all the creatures that will live and thrive on this fresh material, and with all the vitamins in it, using this for energy and this for all the vitamins. How many creatures can spin through this, and earthworms making all that goo and glue to help glue the soil together and make that nice physical structure. So this is, if you have the soil that's of low physical structure, you want to always move towards adding fresher material, because that's got all this good stuff in it, and that'll help spin that food web really fast and give you all those glues and goos to build up your soil structure. And then we still got some fresh material recently dead. This is immature compost. And as the numbers of creatures are increasing here, eating all this wonderful stuff, they're robbing the nutrients from any plants that would be growing here. And of course, if we stirred this into our soil, our growing plants would turn yellow because the creatures would win out. They'd have all this food to eat. They'd take the nitrogen then from the plant and other materials from the plant, because they're better competitors for those nutrient elements than the plant is. Right? They're very small, they're hungry, and they use oxygen. So if you think about it, if you left this right in place, we showed those leaves before, this is going to sink very slowly. But we stir this often and rapidly. Each time we stir it, we have a new opportunity for the creatures that ran out of food right there to suddenly be plunked into a whole bunch of new food. So they're very small, they can't get around. So by bringing the food to them, by stirring it, we're adding fresh oxygen, reinvigorating all those creatures with oxygen, moisture that used up where they were, getting them away from their own wastes, getting them fresh food that they couldn't move to as well. So that'll really make things happen fast. And so as this pile is living with all that life, it's not only generating carbon dioxide, it's also generating heat, the heat of respiration. And that heat is what kills what we call the pathogens. The bad guys generally can't take temperatures above, like, let's say 150. And you can generate that sort of heat by the creatures that really eat this. As it starts to decompose more and becomes less identifiable, that heat then will kill those bad guys. This is a sort of material that you can add to it would be good to add manure to. If you had some fresh manure, like, what am I going to do with this stuff? And you had a pile of this, because you should always have different piles around in your yard. This is where you'd add fresh manure, and the fresh manure with this would just go to town. Talk about a teeming zone of life and activity. But then as soon as that starts to change identity and become the next stage and get broken down, that will really rehabilitate the soil fast. And of course, it's a good mix to have all this wet, gooey stuff with some old straw. It's a perfect combination. What am I going to do with this old straw? it's, you can't really move it into the soil. It'll tie up all those nutrients. But if you can move in with this stuff, you'll end up with a compost that's very, very nice. And I did want to mention that you hear a lot about cover crops and green manures. Again, I wanted to just make the point, each of these, there's so many different cover crops that you might put on your garden. You might put a ryegrass, you might put buckwheat, there's marigold, Sudan grass, all these different brassicas, radishes, all these different things. People say that, they'll let them grow and they're going to give all that, their bodies are going to, the plant dies, they're giving it to the soil to rehabilitate it. Well, all these different plants, it says it here, all these different things these different crops can do. Legumes are known for adding nitrogen and other things too. They're very tender and succulent and soft. They tend to have tap roots. So these different plants have all these different features, and we really need to pay attention to this. It's just a field that's just taken off. I mean, we've always known all this stuff, but practically now, this is what farmers need and want to know. They want, or just growers of any sort. You want to know that Sudan grass some Sudan grasses really suppress nematodes. And some nematodes really like to eat on, iris corms. So if you can get some Sudan grass growing there in the fall, that can be tall and pretty and grow for a while before it dies, depending where you are. But then you or take some Sudan grass straw and spread that on your and for mulch in the fall. Things like that. And all these plants have all these features that you really need to pay attention to, because whatever your compost will be tainted very strongly by what it's made of. So you could have a lot of straw there, but what kind of straw is it? It depends. Your straw can have a big effect on the compost that comes out of that straw. It'd be like adding cardboard into your compost, chewing up some cardboard into your compost pile. It's got a lot of tape on it. Well, the tape's going to be there. The tape residues are going to be in your compost. It might not bother you, but since it's made of it, it's going to be there. And of course, the brown compost, this is the goal. So now the bacterial byproducts, they're less succulent for those organisms. And so now it's starting to slow down. The creatures, the numbers are going way down. There's not so much to eat. And now when you put this on or in the soil, it's not going to rob the plants of the nutrients, because these creatures aren't at such high number and doing so strongly. And so the finished compost, most of the organisms have died. Their bodies represent the stable compounds which continue to decompose. So if you got some beetle in there, that thing's going to slowly break down and get eaten and release all those compounds that are in it over time. And as that happens, there's always more and more nutrients coming out of this, and what this represented down that food web towards those lower level organisms and ultimately roots. And of course, finished compost, that the pile's now cool, the pathogens are killed, no smell. If it still has smell, it's not finished. You should be able to identify what's in there, and we shouldn't see any banana peels. And of course, then you can mix it into the soil, use as mulch. Okay, we're getting near close to the end here. Some fertility things. So the essential plant nutrients, there's a suite of them here: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, boron, manganese, copper, zinc. So when you buy bagged fertilizer, those are inorganic salts. That's NP, that NPK. But compost are organic salts. And so typically, if you could put a 1/4 ton of compost on 1,000 square feet, that's going to maintain, if you've got a horticultural sort of a garden of bedded plants, that's gonna maintain your fertility on a fertile area. Over time, you don't have to add bagged fertilizer, because you've got all this, all these elements were in all these plants, unless they were sickly plants, and they weren't. They're healthy plants, so they've got all this. These are essential plant nutrients. They were in all this. So you shouldn't have to add boron or manganese or copper or any of these micronutrients, or you wonder, do I need more of this or that? No, if you had all this in it, and now it's in here, it's all there. It's still there. I mean, you might have lost some carbon, but you didn't lose this other stuff. So it's still there. And so we've got the dynamics of compost go, it's green, the nutrients are complexed in the material, in the tissue itself, but then the organisms are winning for a while until it finishes, and then the food web gets simplified, and then the nutrients become and are released and become plant available. And there we are, 5% organic matter here on this soil test. Even this standard, just a simple chemical soil test, 5% organic matter. Wanted to talk about compost and nitrogen dynamics here. What we say is each percent organic matter, we know this from experience, yields about 20 pounds of nitrogen to the soil. So rich gardens require about a 5% organic matter content to maintain lush growth. Well, if your soil has a 5% organic matter, which is you'd see that as a dark soil, and if you reach into most vegetable or plant gardens, you'll see 5% organic matter. But that organic matter, just by turning at the speed of nature, that's going to give 100 pounds of nitrogen. You can grow 100 bushels of corn on 100 pounds of nitrogen. That's a lot of fertility, just from the organic matter continuing to spin slowly that soil food web, each percent organic matter. So if you can add regular compost to this, you've got a 5% soil, and you add compost as a top dressing, or you work that in, 2% nitrogen in your compost, you add a ton at 2%, that's 40 more pounds of nitrogen you're adding. So it's like you're adding another 2% organic matter to your soil organic matter, but it's giving you another 40 pounds of N, which is that green up that you like. And that's why we would sprinkle some nice compost around our plants in spring gardening to kind of get things going. And here's we mentioned these signs here. You don't add green compost to gardens because it's tiny of nitrogen. The carbon sugars in the green compost, you get too many, the bacteria outcompetes the plants. It's called fixation because it's fixing the inorganic nitrogen, this available nitrogen, back into organic nitrogen like proteins. It's part of life. And when it's part of life, you can't get it as a plant. But when these creatures die because their population crashes, that's when the nitrogen starts to be released back because of all that death. We call it N mineralization because the N's moving from organic back to mineral. Remember, mineral is the moon, organic is life. And so it's going back to moon nitrogen, mineral nitrogen. That's what the plants can take up. But life is the organic nitrogen. And that's why we would never add fresh wood chips into the soil or fresh compost in, is because we'd put the plants at a disadvantage. I think two or three more slides. Some surface mulches, a new thing they're doing in farming now. I didn't want to show this. I have another slide on this, but this just shows a farm tractor rolling over this tall crop of cereal rye, and they're going to plant right into it. I'll show that in a minute. But surface mulches, just so important for gardening, of course, to control weeds. So very hard for farmers, why I show this. Farmers are coming up with ways now to control weeds without spraying. So if you can grow this cereal rye, you plant it in the fall. This is in the spring. You roll this down. Now here you're going to go your soybeans. Nobody's plowing, so you're saving all that fuel. You're saving all that carbon. You've got weed control, so you don't have to spray that. Where you don't need your Roundup. You've got all this life, and you're building the soil. It's really exciting. But of course, in gardening with a wheelbarrow, you can do the same sort of thing. So many advantages to managing the surface. Yeah, and here this shows another way to roll down that cereal rye. Here on campus, we've got this gadget. We roll it down as this tractor is going through the field. It's rolling down the rye, and behind the tractor, you're pulling the planter. So you roll down the rye, plant the seed, and by the time you leave the field, you see these stripes where you've been down, and 3 weeks later, you start to see soybeans popping up. It's really amazing. It's a game changer, as they say. It's being adopted a lot now. How best do you manage grass sod for garden bed? Well, I start here by saying it'd be criminal to remove sod and then build a garden bed. Well, of course, we have to do it sometimes. The best thing, of course, always is to kill the grass in place. I say with paper or tarps, and then you flip the soil. keep it all there. It's the best stuff there is. It's teeming with life. All those recently dead roots, still living roots. It's just a perfect environment. It's top soil. Fertilizers and limes. Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, from the soil test, this is what they tell you to add: 30 pounds of phosphorus, 20 pounds of potassium. It's this bag fertilizer. It's inorganic, so it's not organic. We can get these same materials from the organics. This is really concentrated, really handy. My gosh, look, we ruled the world using this stuff. But now we're starting to realize, gosh, we can do it without this. It's going to be a little harder, but pay a little more attention managing all this underground herd of animals and creatures. But we can do it because there's a great cost to this. It's just so strong. So we have to be careful when we use it. And so we, like, testing our compost and knowing what we're putting on, knowing what's in our soil to begin with, we can use trace amounts of this or little bits as necessary. Nothing wrong with it. It's just that we don't need to totally rely on it. We can do, there's things coming along that we can really do. Oh, this is the last slide. I just wanted to close on this. Online, of course, these are government publications from the World Wide Web, SARE, the SARE organization. These are geared towards maybe organic farmers or the new movement in farming. They're so wonderfully written. I don't think there's a formula in any one of them. It just talks about principles of what people are doing. Here's that, what they call roller crimper, with that rolling down that cereal and then planting right behind it. Just all these different ways, these cover crops. If you're interested in plants and how plants are used and just where plants and cover crops are going, these books, they're free. You can download them for free, or they're softback. They're really nice softback books. About $20. You can order them. Crop rotation. Just what do all these plants? Who do they affect? What plants they grow good with? What don't you want to follow? What plant orders don't you want to have for different reasons? A lot of really interesting information there if you're a plant person that way. And then the soil, if you're a soil person, that ecological management for healthy soils, and in the context of farming and soil science. So sorry, that's all I know. I went a little over. We started a little late though. That's what I wanted to present. Sorry to talk so much about the soil health test. I just wanted to use it as a foundation, but I hope it puts it all together. A lot of the stuff and you've heard, but maybe now you've heard it another way. So thanks for your time. Just happy to put this together. And if there's any questions, I guess I'll close out of the presentation and go to Zoom.
All right, thank you, Bob. We did have some issues with some people getting in, so those of you that were able to join us, thank you for bearing with us and kind of letting us kind of work through that a little bit. If there are any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box, or you could just, or otherwise you could just unmute yourself and ask them there. We'll give you a couple of minutes to kind of ask if you do have anything.
Checking for Zooms. Also, people liked it. Oh, good.
Yeah. All right, as these thank yous are kind of rolling in here, and as we're there's a question right there. Kathy Dumler, are coffee grounds a good compost material?
Oh yeah, but of course you don't want to. People that anecdotally, roses like them because they're somewhat acidifying, and you take a whole bunch of coffee grounds and pour it around a plant like as a mulch. That's a lot of anything to put around a plant. Imagine if that was that many eggshells. Well, eggshells are good, but it'd be quite a drastic thing. So you just want to be careful with it. What I would say is it's a great compost. What I would do is I'd mix it into my compost pile, and it just enriches everything, and it adds a nice structure. It is good for the roses, and you can mix that half and half with the coffee grounds and some really good compost that you've got, and let that sit for a little bit. And then when it's time to compost around your roses, that's where I'd go with it.
Okay, we have another question from Deborah. What about the prairie patch garden? Does it need compost, or is the living plant compost enough?
Well, it depends on the plants. Some plants don't like it real rich. I don't know what, it's a funny thing to say, don't like it real rich, but they seem to tolerate, pretty austere environments. A lot of plants like to dry out. And if you bring in a bunch of compost and, peck it around I don't know the name of an alpine plant offhand, but my mind's blank, but, sometimes you put a whole bunch of compost around this little plant, you think, oh, I'm going to make this thing grow great. The thing says, what do you, it can't tell you, but your green thumb will tell you, boy, that thing hated all that moisture. You trapped all that moisture around it. It wanted to dry out and get fed once in a while, but it didn't want to be fed all the time and coddled like that. So I'd watch out for, just what plants you're dealing with, but I'd go easy. Anytime it's plants that don't like a lot of food, you can certainly use some sort of use a compost as a mulch to kind of prevent other weeds from competing with them. They're not super vigorous, but I wouldn't overdo it. And any sort of a prairie patch sort of scenario.
Okay, I got another question here from Kathy. Should you do a soil test if planting native plants in a new area?
I think anytime you don't know, that's a soil test is to answer questions. And so have a good question. So if you look at an area and say, well, there's all these willow trees, right? Let me frame it. There's a whole bunch of willow trees over here. I wonder if this is good soil for growing pines. Well, it's not a bad question, but wisdom, just from the way I kind of phrased it, the little question there, you might say, well, if there's willows growing there, you don't even have to bother testing. The pines probably won't do so well. It might be too wet for the pines, sort of thing. And so, you want to match your question, and then you might want to find an area and say, well, I want to plant pines. As I look across the area, I see the willow area, and maybe I won't test. I don't even have to test over there, but I see this knoll over here rising up. Let me go test over there for my pines. Let's see if I've got the acid I need in enough sand that my pine might do better there. And so, you've created a question that, as you test, you're sampling for a reason, rather than, we get a lot of soil samples in, and often you can tell somebody just threw soil in a bag and said, well, what's going on? What can I do? Well, it doesn't really work that way. It's the soil has a lot of capacity to do things, but it's context. What if that was in a real wet area and well, you can't do anything. It's a swamp. The soil tests great, but it's a swamp. There's not too many things you can grow in that swamp. So there's that context of, you want to test, get the information, because the information it's true, but the wisdom of that truth, that translating that truth into, or translating those facts into the truth of the situation, is takes the nuance and that green thumb, that magic, that experience, that wisdom, and that's really what we're trying to bring back to this. What we see a lot in horticulturists and organic gardeners and farmers, they really want to know all that stuff that we used to know, and we've moved so fast, we've jumped over a lot of the old wisdoms and old factoids and old caveats that are very useful and wonderful, and we want to know more about them, and we want to use them, and we want to get that great feeling, because nothing feels better than putting up the right plant in the right place and having it work. I mean, that's really the goal, isn't it? And so, but how do you get there? And it's that applications. So it's really thinking about going forward with the with intention of, what do I want to know and why? And then even to say, well, where do I sample? This is a 10-acre field. Do I sample the whole thing? Well, if you can learn in this one little corner and then upscale it yourself, the whole field's the same. Why would you traipse across the whole thing when this one little part will tell you what's going on there, as much as it's all the same. You don't need to, right? Sometimes you don't need to cover a whole lot of ground if it's all the same. Right, right. You learn driving a car the first mile. What you're going to learn is you won't learn anything more the next 1,000 miles, let's say. So, kind of focus on how can I learn what I need to quickly, get behind the wheel and learn and pay attention. And in that first mile, get that first mile information when you're testing or approaching the questions that you have. Think like you're paying attention, like you're test driving a car. All the things you learn in those 3 minutes in that car, you're taking in all that info. That's that green thumb development stuff. That's where you're getting all that that nuance information, where you're putting that together and modeling in your own mind things that I'm not going to like this, or hey, this is going to be great. I can see this getting even better when I'm driving, that sort of thing.
All right. There is one more question here, but before we get to that, I just wanted to go ahead and remind everyone that this webinar was recorded, and we will be putting it up on our YouTube channel. That's U of I extension CFIV. Again, that's U of I extension CFIV. We're going to try and get that up as soon as possible, since we did have some technical issues. So if you did miss something, you just wanted to go back and rewatch that, you can, or if you came in late. Laura asks, are sycamore leaves good as mulch?
Boy, sycamore's a funny one. You know, they're I call them dinner plates. They're big, they smother really well. They land where it's wet, and then over the winter they're wet a lot. Then in the spring they kind of they get wet one last time, then they start to dry out and get all crunchy. So when would you mulch with them is a tricky thing. If you can catch them in the fall, get them on a pile as part of a compost, then to use them in the spring as mulch would be fine. You know, it's just part of a mixed mulch. I don't know if you'd want to put just crushed. They're too. I think they'd be too dusty all by themselves. When you mix them in with other things, they'd work good.
Okay. Any other questions? Give that a minute there. Well, thanks again, Bob, for your wonderful presentation. And again, we apologize for any technical difficulties that you had trying to get in tonight. If you want to find out more about us, you can find us on Facebook. We got I had just had it up, sorry, but you can search for us at Champaign County Master Gardeners. If you want to like our unit page to see our other programs that we offer here in Extension, you can find us at University of Illinois Extension, Champaign, Ford, in Iroquois and Vermilion counties. I am not seeing any other questions come in, so unless we get one here as I'm wrapping up the talk here, Bob, I think we're pretty much good to go.
Great. Well, I mean, my contact information's I'm an extension, so my contact information's in the presentation. You can always send me an email if there's any questions. If you're like, wait, this doesn't make sense, I'd be happy to at least tell you what I was thinking when I wrote it, and I'll correct it if I was wrong. But thanks for the chance.